LGBT activists are now fighting to put male murderers in women's prisons. But we're the crazy bigots, I guess. Whew, we're going to talk about this crazy story and so much more in today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet and across our politics, all from an independent perspective. Now, without further ado, we got to check in on the ACLU and the alphabet people over in Washington State because they're not okay. Like, I'm not sure what's going on, what's in the water over there, but they are unwell. First, I'm going to read you the side of this story from the ACLU, and then I'll let you in on a couple of the pesky facts that they left out of their presentation of this story. But first, take a listen. ACLU of Washington sues Washington Department of Corrections for unconstitutionally transferring a transgender woman to a woman's prison. The ACLU of Washington filed a personal restraint petition on December 17th on behalf of Amber Kim, a transgender woman currently in the custody of the Washington Department of Corrections for the unconstitutional conditions of her confinement at Monroe Correctional Facility, a men's prison. For over 3 years after DOC made the determination that Ms. Kim needed to be housed in a women's facility, Ms. Kim served her sentence at the Washington Corrections Center for Women. However, in June 2024, Ms. Kim was transferred to Monroe, forcing her to live in a men's prison that does not align with her gender identity and that places her at imminent risk of harm. This is the first time in Washington's history that a transgender woman has been transferred from a women's prison to a men's facility. Ms. Kim has lived at the women's prison since 2021, and at the women's prison, Ms. Kim attended college with a 3.96 GPA, worked as a tutor, and participated in other programming. On March 14th, 2024, Ms. Kim and her cellmate, a cisgender woman, were caught having consensual sexual contact and were each found guilty of an infraction for violating rules around sexual contact. So, as the ACLU tells it in their very serious infinite wisdom, one day the evil people, those far-right radical Republicans in charge of the Washington State prison system, first off, yeah, that doesn't make sense. But these evil bigots and transphobes woke up one day and decided to punish this innocent, beautiful trans woman and remove her from the women's prison for no reason other than sheer spite. And she's just a valued member of this community who is just in prison because of the fact that she double murdered both her parents in cold blood.
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
Which the ACLU left out of their statement, of course. This is not some non-violent offender. This is a convicted double murderer. I think that might be slightly relevant, but what do I know? I'm the crazy one, after all. As National Review reports, Kim was found guilty in 2008 of 2 counts of aggravated first-degree murder in the stabbing of Kim's father, Richard Kim, and the bludgeoning and strangulation of Kim's mother, Terry Kim. The Spokesman Review reported Kim killed Kim's parents at their Mount Spokane home on December 5th, 2006, as they returned from work. After attempting to clean up the murder scene and hide Kim's parents' bodies in an outbuilding, Kim went shopping the next day, using Kim's father's debit card to withdraw $1,000 from Kim's parents' account. For Kim's crimes, Kim was sentenced to life in prison. Not the most ladylike behavior in my book, but hey, I guess the ACLU thinks it's irrelevant to this story that this person put in a women's prison, this person born biologically male, is a double murderer who strangled a woman, their own mother, to death. But where the ACLU takes it next is somehow even crazier, for which we will get into after a quick message from today's sponsor. My home is my most valuable financial asset, so protecting it is a top priority for me. And that's why I'm happy to partner with today's sponsor, Home Title Lock. The FBI calls home title fraud house stealing and warns all homeowners to stay vigilant and monitor their home titles. Every homeowner is at risk of having their home's titles stolen. It just takes one piece of paper filed with the county. Why aren't the authorities doing anything to stop this? Well, the county requires recording systems in the United States are vulnerable to fraudulent, mistaken, and otherwise inaccurate filings. And as long as the documents are filled out properly, government agencies are required to accept them, even if they think they're fraudulent. So you have to protect yourself. And that's where Home Title Lock and their triple lock protection comes in. They monitor your title 24/7 and urgently alert you if there are any changes. Plus, if you're a victim of home title fraud, their team of experts will restore your most valuable asset at no cost to you. You can sign up today at HometitleLock.com/Brad and use promo code BRAD30 for 30 days of protection free, and a comprehensive title history report to make sure you're not already a victim. That's HometitleLock.com/Brad or by using the link in the description. And now back to today's show. Okay, now back to the ACLU. They are arguing that not allowing this biologically male prisoner, who is a convicted double murderer, in a women's prison is unconstitutional, cruel, and unusual punishment and discrimination. Oh my gosh. These are the times we live in, folks. These are the times. This is fine. Everything is fine.
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
The ACLU of Washington argues that the transfer violates Article 1, Section 14 of the Washington Constitution, which prohibits cruel punishment and is more protective than the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Transfer to a men's prison exposes Ms. Kim to an imminent danger of violence, sexual assault, and harassment. And putting a male murderer into a women's prison doesn't expose those women to danger? For the 3.5 years I was housed at the women's prison, I used my time there to learn, to grow, and to contribute positively to the women's prison. Being singled out for exceptional punishment and transferred to a men's prison over a single infraction not only harms me, but every other incarcerated transgender person, said Ms. Kim. The decision to transfer Ms. Kim to a men's prison is cruel and violates the Washington Constitution, said ACLU Washington staff attorney Adrian Levitt. Transphobia on the part of the DOC, Department of Corrections, hurts safety in state prisons and serves no legitimate purpose. You hear that, guys? Segregating prisons by biological sex is transphobia and serves no legitimate purpose. Are we in the upside down world? Am I the one who's hit the crack pipe too many times? Like, that would explain to me, at least, how we got here and how this is going. Because sometimes I wake up, open the news, and I'm just like, am I still sleeping? Is this a nightmare? Am I still dreaming? Or no, this is just 2024, and this is LGBT activism. So one point I want to address here is this notion that all that this transgender inmate did was have consensual sexual activity. It's a little more complicated than that. In the National Review reporting, they explain that they don't actually know whether it was consensual or not, because it's very hard for them to determine that in prison settings, whether it's consensual or non-consensual. So there was sexual conduct and activity between this prisoner and another woman prisoner, but they don't know that it was consensual. That's just what the inmate says, but the actual people in charge don't know, and it's not allowed, so it is a violation of policies regardless. But to me, this story really, it shows how with the radical trans activism, there's just no nuance or no common sense, because I do acknowledge that a legitimate trans woman who transitioned long before becoming a convicted criminal, who maybe committed some sort of white-collar crime, who's had bottom surgery, maybe they should be allowed to go into a women's prison. I don't know. I do acknowledge that they would be at a lot of danger in a men's prison, and I am sympathetic to that. But y'all, a double murderer who strangled a woman, their own mother, shouldn't be in a women's prison. How is that transphobia? How is that bigotry? Am I taking crazy pills? Or is that just not the most commonsensical thing that almost all Americans should be able to agree on? But apparently the ACLU and many democratic states where they transfer these people into women's prisons. This is a widespread phenomenon. It's not super common because there are only so many trans people and there are only so many trans people who are convicted of crimes, but it does happen in many blue states on many occasions. This is where the modern state of LGBT activism is. Like, this is the mainstream LGBT position, and it is totally devoid of nuance, totally devoid of any common sense, any respect for the need for sex segregated spaces in any capacity, and then insults us normal people who can see how insane this is and says that we're bigots. And I don't know. I find the whole thing absolutely insane. And of course, if we were to discuss any sort of nuanced solution, like maybe a third LGBT ward, something Blair White has suggested as some sort of compromise, because I do agree putting trans women into a men's prison sets them up for harm, and I don't want that either, they would say that's discrimination and that's bigotry. Not even that would be good enough for these hardcore activists. So I find them so unreasonable. I have no sympathy for this stuff. And this is the kind of story and the kind of lunacy that is dragging down the LGBT community, that is turning back the clock, that is leading to backlash. This is why people hate us increasingly and don't support the LGBT community. It's because of this insane crap. It's not because of your gay neighbor down the street who wants to get married and adopt a kid. That isn't it. There are some people out there who are actually just genuinely bigoted and are bothered by that, but that is not the majority of people. The majority of people who are starting to backslide on support for this community, it's because of the insanity, and it needs to stop. Because honestly, what does this have to do with me as a gay man? Why am I somehow lumped into this craziness? That's what I don't understand, and what I will not accept. This, not in my name, babe. I got nothing to do with that. You arguing that putting male murderers in women's prisons is human rights. I not me. Couldn't be me supporting that. Don't do that in my name. If you want to call that, honestly, don't even do that in trans people's names, because I think a lot of trans people would say that's crazy. However, if you want to say, oh, that's your trans movement, get the G out of there. Keep that name out of your mouth if you're going to do that in my name, please. I mean, oh my gosh. Guys, I think you can tell this story has me a little fired up. I do want to hear from you guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. I know a lot of you watch this all the time but aren't subscribed. Come on, maybe an early Christmas present for me. You can go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Do hit that like button. Do comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments. I love hearing what you guys have to say, and I pick some to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you leave your comment with a super chat or super thanks, I will definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. Now, it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Today, this libbed out TikTok influencer is spreading some pretty strange fake news. We got to check in with Harry Sisson, the loyal Democratic partisan and TikTok commentator, because he just published a video that made me scratch my head because it took this kind of liberal misinformation and fear mongering in a direction that even I wasn't prepared for, wasn't ready for. I mean, without further ado, look at the video for yourself.
What folks need to understand is that Project 2025 is not just an American thing. The policies in that plan have gone global, and they're already having devastating effects.
So not only is Harry pushing the Project 2025 thing, even though we've been over this, Trump has not endorsed this plan. He supports some of it, but not all of it. He has his own plans. It was just a conservative wish list. They make this every time. They never get all the things on it. He's also now suggesting it's some sort of international conspiracy or something. It's not even just an American thing. Harry, babe, put down the crack pipe.
For example, just look at Javier Milei in Argentina. In less than a year, Milei has gutted healthcare, reproductive rights, education, and more. Poverty has soared and freedom has plummeted. What we're seeing are the real-world effects of extreme right-wing policies which are included in Project 2025.
Hold up. There's so much going on there, so much delulu, off the charts levels of delulu that I hardly know where to begin. But first off, Harry, babe, did you just suggest that in Argentina, Javier Milei, who is a longtime libertarian and free market economist, is passing his policies because of Project 2025? My dude, that's kind of a weird conspiracy. Like, I promise you, he is not downloading PDFs from the Heritage Foundation, having them translated, and getting his policies from there. This guy, Javier Milei, the new president of Argentina, who's doing this really kind of radical shock therapy for free market capitalist policies, the kind of stuff that I like, he has a long documented history of looking to thinkers like Frederick Bastiat, like Hayek, like Ludwig von Mises, these economists, that's where he gets his ideas about slashing the government, ending bureaucracies, liberalizing trade, all this stuff. He's not getting it from Project 2025. Like, did you just make that up? I mean, you're the first one to decry Republicans and their fake news, which, I mean, they spread sometimes, but y'all, lived out influencers really aren't much better, especially when it comes to this Project 2025 thing. They've been some of the biggest purveyors of fake news that I've ever seen. And they're just undying in their dedication to it. It's really quite something. And also, what he's saying about Argentina is just like anti-reality. It's just like, there's the truth, and then there's what Harry's saying. And there's no Venn diagram. It's two circles. Milei inherited economic disaster in Argentina. That's what's important to understand. Like, it was a calamity. Sky-high inflation, massive poverty, all sorts of stuff. And he's put the economy through kind of a shock therapy of slashing government spending, of liberalizing trade, like freer trade, removing tariffs, and of rolling back welfare programs and trying to stabilize the currency and fix the economy. And of course, that's never going to be easy. But Harry's making it sound like Argentina has plummeted from an amazing place into some sort of crisis, but Argentina's actually doing much better. And guys, you don't have to take my word for it. Let me read you from that known right-wing, far-right fake news website, Bloomberg. Argentina's economy expanded faster than expected in October. Economic activity in October rose 0.6 month over month versus an estimated 0.2%. It exited recession in the third quarter of 2024. Wages in Argentina also grew 4.6% in October from September, surpassing monthly inflation for the seventh straight month after price increases wiped out paychecks earlier in the year. Oh, and the poverty rate is now below it was where he took office. He's got wages growing faster than inflation, and he balanced the government's budget. My dude, if that's Project 2025, sign me up. Like, Project 2025, babe, get me hot under the collar.
And this affects us here in the United States because we know that Donald Trump is aligned with Milei.
Of course, the weird thing about this comparison is that it doesn't have anything to do with Project 2025. That's just Harry's Delulu shining through. And what's actually funny about it is he's comparing this to Trump and American conservatives, but there's actually some noticeable differences between Milei and between Trump and kind of the modern conservative movement, one of which is like Milei is a big free trade person. He wants to liberalize trade, whereas Trump and modern Republicans are increasingly protectionist. They want to restrict trade and put up barriers. And so there's actually a huge difference there in their proposal. And then while Trump and Republicans talk about balancing the budget, they've really, when they've been in power, not done that. They've just spent a lot still on different things and still had massive deficits. So they're really not the same. But of course, Harry over here is just totally impervious to facts.
They're best buds. They've praised each other. They congratulated each other on their respective victories, and they've met a number of times, signaling that they're ideologically the same.
So here, Harry just reminds us that he has a very shallow understanding of politics. The fact that two world leaders congratulate each other, say nice things about each other, work together, whatever, does not mean they're ideologically the same. Like, different countries exist in totally different political contexts. There are many differences between Milei and Trump. They just get along. They're both populist. They're both considered right-wing. They're friendly with each other. That does not mean they're ideologically the same. This is not how geopolitics works.
I don't want what's happening in Argentina to happen here in the United States, and I don't think you want that either.
A balanced budget, lower poverty rates than when he took over, and wages outstripping inflation by a lot. Obviously, we don't want to be in the exact economic situation Argentina is because they started in such a bad place that even having made progress, like, it's not all roses over there. But This idea that they're like some scare story for the horrors of free market right-wing policies is totally delusional.
We can fight back, and we must. Let's learn from them and protect our future. The fight is global, and it starts here with us.
So yeah, I mean, I've kind of already been over why, but I'm just so unimpressed with this take. I'm so unimpressed with this guy as this like modern avatar for Gen Z Democrats. Like, y'all can't do better than this. Y'all don't have a deeper bench. There's some others like Dean Withers who seems somewhat smarter and sharper than like Harry and Chris and these guys, but it's like I know right-wing influencers are not exactly the most unimpeachable bunch either, but I'm just always so unimpressed by the caliber of commentary we get from the influencer class. Like, it's getting bleak out here. And people, whenever I talk about Harry and Chris and these, Democrat TikTok boys, they always say, oh, they're paid DNC plans. And they go back to this one payment from the DNC or something affiliated with it to their management company. But it was actually for a pretty small amount. And we don't actually know that that went directly to Harry or Chris for any kind of content. So as far as I know, there's no actual proof they're paid by the DNC. They could be, I don't know, but there's no hard proof of it. And I don't cast aspersions without hard proof about people. And I actually think that's worse. I would actually understand and respect it more. The shamelessness, the just depths of depravity, of debasement that they go through with these low IQ takes online if they were just paid shills. Like, that would actually be more understandable to me. But they're doing this for free. Guys, they're doing this for free. You see how that's worse, right? You do see how that's worse. What do you guys think? I know my audience, you're all big fans of Harry Sisson over here. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And now we got to talk politics for a minute, and in particular, talk Festivus, the annual airing of grievances inspired by Seinfeld that one Republican senator, Senator Rand Paul, has taken inspiration from to release an annual complaint list of complaints that he has with our government, including the massive and insane ways they misspend our money. This new report highlights a total of $1 trillion in government misspending, which, guys, that's a lot of money, is all I'll say. That's a lot of our money being misspent. I'll link to the full report in the show notes, but we're going to go through some of the craziest examples of how the feds spend our money. The Department of State allocated $32,000 for breakdancing, including not just breakdancing programs in the United States, but also in Nigeria. Yeah, because when Americans can barely afford groceries, tax dollars should be going to Nigerian breakdancing? In another example, the National Endowment for the Arts awarded the Bearded Ladies Cabaret a $10,000 grant to support a cabaret show on ice skates focused on climate change. They gave them 10 grand to do a drag show about climate change on ice. It's like some bureaucrat somewhere was like trying to come up with what would trigger Matt Walsh the most, and let's fund it. But yeah, let's just say that I think the drag queens should have to buy their own ice skates, not get taxpayer funded ones. Tax dollars also went to promoting DEI in bird watching, as the National Science Foundation spent $288,000 to ensure that bird watching groups have safe spaces, aka affinity groups. The NSF approved a grant of $288,000, $563, to create affinity groups within ornithological societies, basically bird watching clubs, based on identity characteristics. That's right, nearly $300,000 of your tax dollars are being used to sort bird watchers into groups based on who they are or how they identify themselves, rather than what they love, watching birds. Well, of course, you can't expect gay bird watchers to watch birds in the same groups as the straight people. That would be crazy. Up next, an interesting intersection of feminism and climate change. The Department of State spent $3 million for, quote, girl-centered climate action in Brazil. According to the grant details, the program is designed to empower young women to become climate leaders by integrating equity and inclusivity into environmental activism. So call me crazy, but I kind of think we have enough female-empowered climate change leaders.
How dare you?
Like, we could do with a little bit less. And here's the most interesting one, because as you know, the US government has spent billions and billions of dollars on aid for Ukraine. And some of this aid has gone to questionable things like paying down their government deficit and paying for their government bureaucrats' retirement plans and other things when Americans can barely afford our retirement here. Apparently, they've also been funding Ukrainian influencers. That's right, the Department of State squandered $4,840,000 funding Ukrainian influencers. That's good. At least they'll have TikTok songs to keep the war effort up or something. Now, here's my personal favorite from this list, which is the Department of Interior spent $12 million on a Las Vegas pickleball complex. Now, I'm a pickleball guy. I play with my family. I play with my boyfriend. We enjoy the sport of pickleball. But I also hold the radical view that if Las Vegas needs more pickleball courts, Las Vegas should pay for that, not the whole country. And here's a big one. We are funding ghost towns on the government's dime because the federal government spent $10 billion on maintaining, leasing, and furnishing almost entirely empty buildings. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but that would be lying. And we don't lie to you. Here on the Brad versus Everyone show, we tell you the truth. Guys, what do you think of all this crazy government waste? Please let me know in the comments below. I am not surprised because as Milton Friedman, as he explained, you know I have my Milton Friedman quote behind me on the wall, the government is ultimately responsible for spending other people's money on other people, which is not a recipe for efficiency or success or frugality. Now is it? Let me know in the comments and do hit that like button if you've enjoyed today's episode. Now we'll wrap up today by reading a few of your comments from recent episodes. One person says, as far as the cake part, what would she, referring to the fat activist from last week's episode, say about somebody who refuses it entirely because they don't eat sweets? I'm mostly keto. Would that be unacceptable? I'm sure that would be considered an even worse fat-phobic microaggression. Or I guess I should say macroaggression. About the pay raise, this commentator says, as far as I understand, it is a cost of living raise. I'm not saying I agree with it, but isn't living in DC insanely expensive, even with that kind of paycheck? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Yes, it is expensive to live in DC, but you can certainly do that on $176,000 a year, not including any spousal income or their stock trades, by the way. But no, what I'm saying is, no one else gets an automatic cost of living increase. And part of the reason the cost of living went up is their own damn fault. So yeah, I just don't have a ton of sympathy for them getting that until our financial house is back in order. Then maybe we can talk. This commenter concludes, I really enjoy your channel and your content. I primarily watch the Daily Wire, but I got hooked seeing your more independent perspective. I'm also a bit upset about Brett Cooper leaving as well. I would interact more with your videos, but I watch most of your stuff downloaded as Wi-Fi is spotty on deployment. P.S. I love hearing about your boyfriend and your adventures and the like. Reminds me of my husband. Well, thank you for your service, and I really appreciate that. That's very kind. I, too, was sad to see Brett Cooper departing the Daily Wire because she's really the only one of their content creators who I find myself agreeing with very often or liked her approach to her content. And I do know her a little bit. We worked together years ago, and she's a really cool girl, but I'm sure she's going to kick ass with whatever she does next. Another person says, hey, Brad, I'm a capitalist pig for life. Oink, oink. I can't get my head around communists who have seen the millions killed under their ideology and their first thought being, let's try it again. Also, a hilarious, ironic fact, Karl Marx is buried in London and you have to pay to see his grave. Love the show. Merry Christmas. I wish I'd known that when I'd been there. I would have really enjoyed seeing his grave, actually. No, that's mean. I don't really mean that. But no, it is interesting. I think, one, they don't believe a lot of the historical facts about the death tolls of communism. And two, they basically do this thing where they attribute all modern death to capitalism. And the existence of scarcity as we know it to capitalism. And then they say, well, more people die under capitalism, which doesn't actually make sense, but that's how they justify it. Another person says, as far as I'm concerned, you don't speak enough about your boyfriend. Big fan. Yeah, that's the funny thing about that comment. It's like I barely talk about my boyfriend because he's a very private person, so I don't bring him up. I don't bring him on camera. I don't do as much with him in terms of content as I would probably prefer because that's not his wishes, and I respect that. So to have somebody be like, don't talk about your boyfriend, ew, was all the more galling because of that. Like, sir, no. Your next line of merch needs to have this on it. You can't make this shit up with a cartoon face of you saying it. Maybe I'll keep it in mind. Remember, guys, I'll link to the merch store. It's not too late to get yourself some Brad versus Everyone merch. The math is not mathing and all that. I'll put a link in the description. Another person said, my boss just lost her husband because he refused to try to quit smoking and diet and exercise. He left her with 2 small children by herself. He did owe them his health, or at least his effort. Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, now that you say that, I think you do owe your family and your loved ones your health to that extent. I don't think you owe strangers your health, but when you commit to people, yeah, you should try to take care of yourself. That's part of taking care of them. Another person says, is this a hoax or what? If not, what happened to my body, my choice? If a woman wants to eat less cake, it is her choice because it is her body. Shame on Virgie Tovar for shaming these women. Who's trying to control women's bodies now? Huh? Yeah, that's a good point. But apparently the my body, my choice thing only goes so far as your choices don't offend fat people. Somebody says, LOL, for me, it's not the eyebrows, it's the teeth. I'm a bit jealous. Eyebrows, eyes, the whole face, all very charismatic, but the teeth are the MVPs. I loved how you answered that mean guy too. Extremists from the left or right need to understand that by being what they are, insufferable, they're literally helping the other side. Yeah, I agree. But to be clear, guys, I do get my teeth professionally whitened. And I did have braces, so it's not like all natural. I know I have nice teeth, but it's not like that's just me existing. No. Somebody else says, do it, Brad. Double down talking about your boyfriend as much as you want. It's called free speech. Also, I identify as a straight man, but nothing is going to stop me talking about my boyfriend. Okay, I have some questions, but thank you for your support. Another person says, first of all, I had to laugh at your hater and his lack of cleverness with his digs at you. I love the way you so easily dismissed him, though. See, folks, we gays can defend ourselves against hate without using it as a building block for the construction of victimhood manner. Wow, that's a good turn of phrase. I might have to steal that. As a morbidly obese person, this fat czar person needs to go. This person says, I'm 47, 5'7", and weigh about 380 pounds, and I do recognize it as a genuine health struggle. All I ask is for kindness and respect as a human being. What I don't need is this fat acceptance malarkey. I totally get it. I know it's hard, and I just am encouraging you and sending you support, hoping that you can make positive strides in your journey. But thank you for the comment and for the support. Another person says, as somebody who was born in the USSR, the Soviet Union, it always makes my eyes roll when I hear some young American whose only knowledge of how it is from talking to some other young Americans about cliff notes of Capital that they read while sipping their almond milk lattes. Hey, actually, oat milk lattes are where it's at. Discussing how good communism and socialism is. Let's ask them to take their iPhone, which they probably didn't pay for, and give it to some homeless dude on the street because wealth needs to be shared. All of a sudden, they are not such commies anymore. Yeah, people have a tendency to be very socialistic when it comes to redistributing other people's resources, but significantly less so when it comes to redistributing their own. Another person says, I've been both obese and extremely underweight. I went through anorexia treatment here in the Bay Area in 2018. So much of the rhetoric came from the health at every size movement, and because I had been obese as a teenager, seriously pissed me off. I credit my sustained recovery and healthy weight to the spite I have for intersectional theory infecting healthcare. Proud to say I'm a competitive athlete who takes great care of her body in my 30s. Well, I'm so happy for you and proud of you that you made it through all that and are doing great, but it's very disturbing that that kind of stuff has infiltrated our healthcare system because these are the people that are supposed to know better, that are supposed to be actually rooted in the science, which fat positivity and healthy at every size are not. Somebody writes, you only think socialism is bad because every time it's been tried, it's led to brutal dictatorship, ruined economies, famine, and suffering. But Brad, it's never been done right. This time, they'll do it right, and it will work. Sunshine and rainbows for everyone. Yeah, I appreciate your skepticism and sarcasm, and you can color me similarly skeptical of these TikTokers' utopian visions. Another person says, thanks, I agree with you about Kennedy cherry-picking research on autism, but he's the only person who has the guts to challenge conventional wisdom and the authorities on the ingredients that the FDA has allowed into our foods. Some of these ingredients cause me major problems that most people think are BS. So although he's wrong on some topics, I want him to do what he has planned to do. You know, this is an interesting point I get from people about RFK when I point out my criticisms about him is they talk about the important points he does raise. And I guess I'd just say, like, there's got to be somebody we could put in charge who has criticisms of big pharma, who has criticisms of the food system, who wants to make America healthy again, but doesn't have some of the crazy conspiracy views. Like, there's got to be somebody. Another person says, why are people resentful of health insurance companies when they deny vital care, but never grateful to them when they pay for life-saving care that a patient could never have afforded on his own? Many people seem to think there's a pile of free healthcare lying around, which anyone could take from if only health insurance companies didn't interfere. If health insurance has negative value, why does anyone pay for it? Yeah, health insurance is complicated, and it is in many ways broken and messed up in this country, but ultimately it is just a financial tool for risk pooling and for resource allocation, and the underlying scarcity of health insurance is the problem, of health care rather, not health insurance. And in systems without private health insurance, they ration it through wait lists and other things where people die on wait lists and other problems. So there isn't a perfect system. And I do agree that if you're going to hate them for the negative outcomes, you also should give them some credit for the positive outcomes, but that's too much to ask. Another person comments, if saying homeless is offensive, how about free range people? That is funny, and I hadn't heard that one before, so thank you for sharing it. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go, and remember to comment with your thoughts, because I do take the time to read the comments, and I actually pick a few to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you do leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I will definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. And with that, we'll talk again tomorrow.